Hello, everybody. I'm here with Mike Stein. He is an 81-meter javelin thrower from University of Iowa. He's a Big Ten champion and a two-time All-American. So, Mike, you have a slightly different training style from a lot of athletes,
Yes.
and I want to talk to you about that today. Thanks for joining, and
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'm
absolutely, let's get
I'm
right into
honored to
it.
be a part of it. Yeah.
So tell me, what do you do different with your training than most athletes?
Yeah. I think I do quite a bit of different things. So, when you look at like the weight room, a lot of guys will just go in there and try to jack up all their lift numbers. Like, oh, I have to get a 405 squat and I have to get a 315 pound bench, and my Olympic lifting numbers got to be, elite. There's maybe a time and place for that, but I think a lot of people end up getting hurt chasing weight room metrics that don't necessarily transfer and don't lead to higher functionality and higher, outputs actually in their skill. It doesn't quite carry over because, how many times have you seen a guy and he can squat 405, he can squat the house, but he's slow as molasses, and it happens all the time.
Yep.
I would say it happens more than you see the successes of heavy squatting and stuff. And then also, I'd say with skill work, I'm a believer in less is more. So obviously, some of the influences from Tony Holler, Feed the Cats. If I'm sprinting, I need to be at maximum speed, and I need to be chasing max speed. Or if it's acceleration, you need to be getting quality work over just mindless quantity, because you see in the NCAA system, people feel like they're falling behind if they're doing less. And actually, this leads to a lot of injuries. This led to a lot of injuries for me. I've had a sports hernia, Achilles tendonitis, torn labrum, multiple UCL injuries, elbow injuries, even all kinds of stuff like jumper's knee and plantar fascia problems. You name it, I've had it, and from the traditional style of training. So I knew I had to make a change.
And define skill work. Is that just like literally what it sounds like?
Yeah, so skill work for me is sprinting and throwing, and of course throwing is my main skill, and what I need to develop is my throwing technique. But at the same time, speed is a part of your throwing technique with your approach and stuff. So yeah, any throwing, any technical work, any sprinting, I consider that skill work. So if you look at a pyramid, I kind of break it into three phases of a pyramid. You have the foundation, which for me is position, isometric positions, feet, hips, spine, shoulders, grip, and positions like a lunge, a single leg stand, straight leg raise, push up, hangs. These foundational movement patterns. That's level one of the pyramid. Level two is taking it to plyometrics within those positions, and creating and absorbing force rapidly out of those positions, which is also extremely important. And then that level three is your skill work. It's sprinting maximum speed. It's throwing any level of throwing. Throwing could be somewhat in the second part of the pyramid if it's
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more lower intensity and you're building up. But in general, working on your technique is the third part of the pyramid. So if you
Gotcha.
can imagine, most of my time spent at the bottom of the pyramid, a little bit less time, but a lot of time at the second part, and then at the third part. That's why I believe in honestly microdosing a lot more of that and having really high quality work with that skill
And
work.
is the theory behind that uh, with microdosing, you're more fresh in each rep and you get higher quality reps? So
Exactly.
you're
Yeah. So
good.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So why would I want to work on my technique? Why would I want to work on throwing or sprinting if that work, the quality of it is so reduced that it doesn't transfer over to
Mm-hmm.
improving my skill?
Yep.
And I think one way to really chase that is, rank, record, publish, another Tony Holler principle. If you're measuring how good you're doing, you can kind of auto regulate your training. So if I'm sprinting and I'm doing fly tens, and say that day I'm hitting like 108 or something, if I fall too far below that, I believe the number is about 3% drop off, then you want to stop
Mm-hmm.
because your injury risk gets extremely higher, and you're just not working on speed anymore. And the same can apply to throwing, especially, when you're ripping full approach throws. If you're throwing, say I throw probably 78 to 79 on my best practices. If I drop to like 74 on multiple throws, 2 throws, I'm just done. What's the point? I'm putting bad reps in the bank, and that's how you get hurt.
Will you actually, if you feel like you have an off day or your nervous system just isn't fast, will you just not practice that day?
Yeah, so then on days like that, I will not work on the skill work.
Gotcha.
And I will simply work on level 1. And I believe that level 1, that position work, the isometrics, the extreme isometrics, those can and maybe should be done almost every day. And,
Wow.
Some days, obviously, you're going to be reaching into that position 2 or level 2 a little bit more with plyometrics out of that. But I really believe you can do isometrics in that foundational work every day. And I know that's a buzzword, foundational work, but to me, position is the foundation. And you can do as much of that because when you're in an extreme isometric, you're training, but at the same time, you're recovering your nervous system. You're teaching the muscle firing patterns out of that. If you're pulling into position, especially on the isometrics, you're teaching the coordination, the firing patterns, and you're building strength in foundational human movement patterns.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you explain what some of those isometrics you do are?
Yeah, so I would say the main isometrics that I do, a lunge position. And I'm pulling into position on these, which means, you've heard of yielding isometrics probably, which is where you hold a position.
Can you explain that for people?
Yeah. So there's 3 types of isometrics. Most people, it's long duration yielding isometrics where they sit in a position. It's a little bit passive, and they go until they fatigue out of it. And then there's overcoming isometrics, which is where you're pushing into an immovable object. Well, the third, and the one that I believe has the most transfer to athletic movement, explosive movement, developing fast twitch fiber, that's pulling into position isometrics. So an example of this is on a lunge with your front leg. You're trying to activate your hamstring. A lot of people are just sitting in the lunge and their VMO and their quad just kind of fatigues out. We want to train the muscle firing pattern, and we want to create as much length between the 2 legs as we possibly can, while creating tension within our body. So you're learning to take the slack out of your system and generate tension in your body, which is key to move at velocity. Instead of, traditional lifting, you look at traditional lifting, you put a barbell on your back, and that takes the slack out of your system for you. So you never truly learn how to create those forces without an external load. Well, what happens when we're on the field? What happens when we're on the runway? You create tension within your own body. If you can't do that, you're not going to perform as well. You don't have a barbell on your back to do it for you. So it's all about doing this. You have to master the position with your body weight, and weight is a tool. You can use weight. But yeah, so my favorite positions for isometrics: lunge, push-up, like deep push-up, so elevating the chest. Dip also could be used in place or alongside of the push-up. You're trying to pull yourself further down. So you're almost rowing with your back. You're creating tension with your back. So the whole idea of pulling into position is that you're eccentrically lengthening the muscles that you want to create tension in. And this teaches your system to feel safe in those positions, generate tension in those positions. And that really has a high impact both on your nervous system output and your fast twitch fiber. So anyways, before I get too sidetracked, my favorite positions for isometrics: lunge, push-up, hang, single leg stand, straight leg raise, which turns into a little bit more of a yielding isometric just because of the nature of it. I really love calf raise, so like Cal Dietz spring ankle series. You can do that with weight, without weight. And then extreme wall sit, where you pull yourself down with your hamstrings. That's great. That's kind of more of your squat pattern. But yeah, those are my main positions, and those are from a guy named Jay Schroeder. I learned them from watching Jay Schroeder's training. Dan Fichter, who also learned under Jay Schroeder, and then Tommy John III, or Dr. Tommy John. I learned a lot from him as well about these isometrics. And yeah, the beauty of them is you can do them every day. And you're only going to get better. Obviously, there's times where accumulating 3 to 5 minutes of these might be too much if I have if I have skill work the next day.
Yep.
You can still fatigue yourself. But at the same time, you get to a point where it actually recovers you. You can do them every single day.
Yep.
And I'll talk a little bit about the amount of time on these. So when you're in these, you want to pull hard the whole time, pull into position pretty hard the whole time to get the most out
Real
of it.
quick, explain what that means to pull into position.
Yeah, so like I was saying on the lunge, I'm trying to pull myself further down and create more length between my hips and eccentrically lengthen my hamstring. But I'm pulling with my hamstring and generating tension with my front hamstring, and I'm trying to create more space away from the back hip.
So if you were doing like a split like this,
yes.
Are you trying to pull your legs back together?
I'm actually, so with the front leg, I'm trying to pull my center of mass forward like I was sprint, right?
Oh,
and then
gotcha.
with the back leg, I'm trying to lengthen it more.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to create more space. So it's
Gotcha.
almost creating as much stride length as I can. Now, don't get this confused either with doing a front split, stretching per se.
Mm-hmm.
You want, position is the most important thing. So on a lunge, for example, you want your front leg to be at about 90 degrees.
Okay.
You can go a little bit more over your foot or a little bit more behind your foot, depending on where you feel more tension. And I like to elevate off the heel on the front foot. So with the push-up, it's, you got to maintain core integrity, but then you got to pull yourself down, create as much length through your chest as you possibly can from your elbow.
Now, this is kind of go ahead.
We might have to demonstrate this sometime. We might have to do.
Yeah, and what I can do is insert some videos of you doing it.
Yes, for sure.
In the edit.
Sure.
Now, this is kind of the big question.
Yeah.
First of all, have you completely replaced traditional lifting with isometrics?
Okay, so the base of my training is for those isometric positions, and then doing plyometrics out of them as well. So oscillating isometrics or plyometrics out of them. And for the most part, yeah, like I don't really squat all that much. I'll sometimes do the squat pattern. I talked about the squat pattern. It's still an important pattern. And heavy squatting could be part of that. But where I'm at, I don't necessarily feel like my squat numbers are all that relevant. And, I'll do flywheel squat. I'll do the Kaiser squat. Gotcha. For those who have heard of that.
Yep.
I get a ton out of resisted sprinting too, in terms of squatting. So really a lot of my focus is on power, and the isometrics will get me the time under tension needed. I like to push bench press, I'll admit. I'm a little bit of a meathead with bench press in and of itself. You can get a heavy stimulus on that. But I'm not going in and doing bodybuilding, for example, all the time. And, you can still do regular reps and whatnot. But I think, when you train too much like a bodybuilder, and I have in the past, chasing hypertrophy, traditional lifting, I got super clunky. I got unathletic. I gained mass, and I think that helped to an extent with my throwing. I actually think that helped.
Yeah.
But this style of lifting can also help you gain mass.
Interesting.
So with isometrics, I truly believe that, it activates your nervous system to a point where, if you give your body what it needs from a nutritional standpoint, for your skill, you're gonna kind of morph into the athlete you need to become. Just by eating however much you need. If you need more weight, more mass, your body's gonna fuel itself and it's gonna build. I don't think you need to be hammering Arnold Schwarzenegger bodybuilding or anything, to gain mass. I don't necessarily think you need to do that.
Do you think there's still a place for that in this workout style?
Yeah, there's definitely a place for reps. I do a lot of calf raises. I still do a lot of push-ups. I do bench press reps still. Three-way shoulder, joint moves. Joint moves are also a part of the system. So,
Gotcha.
Three-way shoulder, you're basically, doing a lateral raise, front raise, and a scap retraction. I'll do that for 5 or 10 minutes, and it's more getting into the joint.
Is the bodybuilding more for injury prevention?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it's really, it's essentially joint moves, and you can load them as you need, But I think a lot of people overestimate, I need 100-pound dumbbells to be able and to go bench them to be able to do this. No, you do it lightweight. It's very micro changes, and there is a level of volume that is great on the level one stuff. Like I said, on the foundation, the level one stuff, there I do believe in volume there of training, and I think that training those foundations will allow you to handle more skill work if you want.
Good point.
And be more resilient. But at the same time, people jump steps. They're like, I need to run 10 tempo runs, and they get hurt because they're not ready for it. Hold on a second. I think the audio went off. There we go. I can hear you.
How's
there
that?
we go. Yeah,
Good?
Perfect.
Awesome.
I think every so often it's just going off.
Oh, well.
That's fine. We'll work through it.
Would you agree that the heavier the implement or task you are accelerating, whether that's in football, like a lineman needs to move a very heavy person, or a shot put, you need to move a much heavier implement, for heavier things like that, building up mass and raw strength in the weight room might be more beneficial?
Yeah, I think could be a useful key for them. At the same time, when you're in a pulling into position isometric, you can generate absurd amounts of force,
Gotcha.
In the isometric position and actually stay in it longer. So, and then also on the other side of that, we're talking about plyotizing these positions a little bit. So an altitude drop, say, I jump off of a 36-inch box, a 4-foot box, the amount of force you absorb at the bottom is way more in a way quicker time than, slowly moving through a squat. And it has impact.
That's
so
true.
when you go on the field, these are collisions. It's collision training. And this is where collision training is so important. So, this is almost a foundational move in itself, the collisions, the depth drops. You can do that for your upper body as well. So, dropping into the deep push-up position and catching yourself, there's a lot more force going through your system in a lot faster time. And you know what the key is? To hold in the perfect position, to land essentially in the isometric position.
Yeah.
And positions allow you to, absorb force quickly. Allows you to hold your integrity and handle these forces, which is the key to movement.
Yeah, I agree. Have you been? Go ahead.
I think heavy load has its place, especially the heavier implement or the demands of your sport. I agree that to some level, yes, but I don't think you necessarily get that through Olympic lifting or bodybuilding all the time, for example.
I do agree with that. And I'm not super knowledgeable about this, but I would just assume that a more traditional style of lifting could increase probably give you more mass, combined with the right diet.
Yeah, I think you might be able to pack mass on maybe quicker, but I think it might end up out of equilibrium almost a little bit. You see how many times you see a guy go in the weight room, they spam a bunch of bicep curls and all this stuff, and they come out and it's not integrated to their whole system. You need to train. You need to train your whole body. And when you're doing an isometric, you're not just working your legs, on a lunge. You're training your whole system in equilibrium, and I think that's super important. Obviously there's a point for some isolation work if you want your joints to be healthy, working on specific moves, but I don't think just going in and adding mass to certain parts of your body, like your biceps or your lats, I don't necessarily think that is the best for athleticism.
Yeah,
you can do it quickly.
I agree.
You can do it quickly. I won't disagree with you on that.
I completely agree. Has your training with isometrics, have you noticed results so far?
Yeah, definitely. Especially in terms of injury healing and stuff. Like every time I've kind of gone the more traditional route with strength and conditioning, or overdone skill work, I end up getting hurt, and I end up going back to these basics. So I'm like, why am I not just doing this for my whole training? I've adapted my training now. This is all I'm doing for the most part. And every time the isometrics would get me back on a timetable way quicker than, traditional PT or whatever. And yeah, so definitely in terms of injury prevention, and also, I think one of my secrets to success with technique is being able to find key positions in the throw, and I'm really strong in those positions, and that is what transfers to distance.
Yep.
And I feel like my technique has improved massively just from being able to organize and sequence my body in the correct manner to absorb that force. Whereas, when you're doing traditional lifting, I think it kind of strips that element of the nervous system out of it a little bit.
I agree. Yeah, and that's one thing I really noticed when I did traditional lifting was all of my practices were terrible. So I think one thing that you could take away from this is isometrics just keep you more fresh and
Yes,
less prone
exactly.
to injury.
And it allows you to work on your skill more consistently. And like we said, I'm more on the lower volume end of things, but when you prepare your body in such a way, you do reach a point where you can handle higher volumes of high quality skill work, the more prepared your body is. And I think isometrics allow you to do that. And another thing with these isometrics, and my whole training system isn't just isometrics like we were talking about. There's also the component of altitude drops and rebound reps and absorbing force quickly and reproducing force quickly. That's super important. But I think the isometrics have that recovery component where you take your body to a place where you're training maximally, you also recover maximally, and you're able to do it damn near every day.
So are you doing isometrics 7 days a week?
Pretty much, yes. Isometrics and also the altitude drops and the rebound reps. Some days I might prefer a little bit more of the altitude drops, rebound reps out of these positions. Gotcha. But yes, isometrics, some form of isometrics pretty much every single day. I do 5 minutes of hangs every single day. I try to hit about close to 3 minutes on all my isometric positions every day. And if I don't do isometrics, I usually do, 50 plus reps of some sort of rebound or altitude drop in that position as well instead.
And that consistent exposure to every day is teaching your body that movement's safe, and that movements similar to that are safe.
Yes, you start to own the positions and you start to be able to absorb force and produce force rapidly. And there's a quote from Jay Schroeder that I had on one of my posts recently that I want to bring up here. It's, movement's the key to life, right? And velocity is the key to movement. Well, what's the key to velocity? It's position. Position is the key to velocity. So you own the position, your velocity gets higher, and then your movement quality gets way higher because of it. And that's where I was saying with my technique, I don't think I'd be an 81-meter thrower if I hadn't started doing isometric training. Since high school, I've been doing some level of this. Now I've fully committed to it now, and I feel better than I ever have before.
Wow. Let's get into a little bit of and we've already kind of been talking about this the whole time, but let's really hone in on the nervous system and the feed the cats mentality. Explain what the feed the cats mentality is and your understanding of it and how you implement that into your training.
For sure. So it's quality over quantity, and it's essentialism. So why am I going out and jogging when it detrains speed? Why would I waste my time doing tempo runs when it ends up being low quality reps? You know what's high quality? You know what transfers to your technique? It's sprinting max velocity, because your nervous system gets used to such high speeds. How many times, for example, in javelin throwing, people are afraid to run in on a full approach and their body has inhibition because their nervous system's not ready for that force. Sprinting is the ultimate way to develop the nervous system, and a high firing CNS, high firing, fast twitch fiber. You develop that through sprinting. So, but you have a limit on how many reps you can do at that max speed. So most practices, it's 3 or 4 sprints tops, maybe less. It could be 1 or 2. Now, I mean, you could obviously, maybe some people can take it up even more, but um, you reach a point where it's diminishing returns. And you don't want to train into diminishing returns because you start detraining speed and you start detraining the nervous system. So with the nervous system, it's always quality over quantity. It's always prioritizing speed, and then also prioritizing position and neural drive in those positions with, say, the isometrics, for example.
So I'm trying to think. Um, I'm thinking of your post about the Pareto principle.
Yes.
And real quick, just explain that and we'll get
Yeah.
into it.
So the Pareto principle, what are the 20% of things that deliver 80% of the results? That's what you need to be working on. So in my case, for a javelin thrower, my approach technique needs to be really good. Well, I need speed in my approach. I need the ability to absorb and produce force rapidly, and I need to have a really fluid throwing motion. So why would I waste my time working on anything else? All right, some people think that tempo running and extensive jogging and thousands of field reps with technique are the way to develop your technique. That might maybe in theory that could deliver the last 20%, but you reach the point with that stuff, with that fluff, where you detrain the 80% of the 80% of results, the 20% you did for the 80% of results, you end up detraining that and you get hurt. So to train consistently and constantly develop, you need to be constantly attacking the essentials and what matters. And with that, I mentioned earlier, rank, record, and publish. So you need to pick some metrics and you need to get really good at them. So, for me, I really like, in terms of speed, I like, a 40 time or a fly 10, and I like broad jump for power, and, maybe a fly 20. And then for throwing, your 3-step, 5-step, 7-step, and then your, obviously your short and full approaches matter a ton too. And then for throwing power, 1 kilogram and 2 kilogram ball throws for distance. So it's like we need to really pursue throwing power. We need to really pursue throwing technique, and we really need to pursue max speed. What else really matters? I mean, is there really anything else that matters in throwing a javelin? I know some people think that, for them, throwing a shot put overhead behind their back is the way to develop power, but that just doesn't work. Okay, I know a lot of people who got really good at that test, and it doesn't necessarily transfer over to anything.
Yeah, I agree. How do you think somebody could, in their specific sport, figure out what that 20% is that gets the 80% of the results, and then how would they implement that?
Yeah, so this is where I think for all sports, that's where I think the isometric positions, that automatically, I think position and teaching your body how to generate force and absorb force, I think that comes first, obviously, being the first level of the pyramid. And then the skill work, don't take thousands of meaningless reps. For you golf, right?
Yep.
So, obviously in some technical sports, in golf, or shooting a basketball, you might be allowed a lot more reps, for example. But we all know when we're in a session, we reach a point of diminishing returns. We've all felt it. You lose that flow state. Right. You lose that neural drive. And you practice bad reps.
Exactly.
So it might not be any specific drill in particular that's, the silver bullet. But I think the principle of, I'm going to stop when I start feeling diminishing returns. And I'm going to use that also through measurement and auto-regulation. So, say you hit a ball less distance on the driver after a certain amount of reps, let's move down. Let's move to something else. Or in javelin, like I said earlier, if I'm pursuing, getting my throwing power up and I'm throwing the 1 or 2 kilogram ball, and after about rep 5 or 6, I notice I'm out of the flow state and I'm not throwing quite as far and my power's diminishing. Let's move on to something else or be done for the session. And this really can mitigate a lot of injuries because what
Mm,
happens when you get injured, it's, your body wasn't prepared for that stimulus. And a
hmm
lot of times, too much volume, too much junk volume is what does that for you. Now, I think volume on things that matter, like, the isometric positions, absorbing, producing force, you can spend more time in there. But even in those, there does come a point where you just have to listen to your body
hmm
and you have to know when to stop and you have to
Yep.
know what to feed your body.
Yep.
What movements is your body craving? It's just like
hmm
food.
Yeah. So essentially, uh, stop while you're still fresh. Listen to your body, and another thing about that I noticed is when you start getting fatigued, the sloppiness and sort of um,
Yes.
low quality reps, or sorry, I would say more specifically, low coordination reps are what
Yeah, those are
really increase
sloppy
your risk
reps
of
that
injury.
and they detrain you. So you get injured, or in the very least, if you somehow make it through, then you got a ton of reps in the bank that pulled out of the bank account balance. They're pulling money out of your bank
Mm,
account balance per se, and it's detraining you. Why would I want to work on sloppy technique? I want to work on great technique. And I know some people think, you have to put in an absurd volume. You have to put in consistency, and you're not going to be consistent if you're hurt.
yeah,
So,
that's the other thing.
yeah, I mean, Tony Holler uses the example of the casino. You go there, if you walk away with the small gain, say, you go in there and you play blackjack and you walk out plus 200. I'm not endorsing gambling either, by the way, but
I know
you
you're
know,
not. I know you're not.
yeah. So although casinos can be fun because you can smoke cigars in them. I like it, but you walk out with plus 200. No one ever does that. You
Right.
get 200. You got the dopamine running through your system. You want to keep going. Well, you end up losing. You probably end up in debt to a mafia boss. And you get killed. So
Yeah.
it's that principle all the way with your sport. With your skill work especially.
Hmm. So what you're saying with that analogy is that essentially putting in good reps, and I've heard this from somewhere else, I forget where, but putting in good quality reps are putting money in the bank, uh,
Yes.
so that you're actually you'll actually be better and faster your next practice.
Yep.
Whereas overtraining, you're taking away from the next practice. And if you do that, it kind of compounds, just like the analogy
Precisely. Yes,
where
it's compound interest. Yes.
you're if you're training high quality reps, they just keep stacking on top of each other and you can do it more consistently. Maybe
Yep. And that's
maybe
where you get
you,
breakthroughs instead of plateaus.
right. Whereas if you overtrain, now you'll either take longer to recover and you can't practice again for a while,
Yeah.
or you force it and you do train through, uh, you know, 1 or 2 days after you just killed yourself in a practice. Now you're fatigued and a lot higher risk of injury, and you're practicing sloppy reps.
Yep. Exactly. That's exactly it. And another holler quote: "Don't let today ruin tomorrow."
There you go.
Uh, and we're all guilty of it. I'm still guilty of it. I still do it. I take things too far because I think it's important to have that level of work ethic and drive, but you got to transform that into intensity and being smart. You can't let your emotion get in the way to the point where you're forcing it and you get hurt because of it. And I've done that more than anybody in my career. And I'm just starting to figure this out, even after hearing this message for a while now. I'm just starting to figure it out.
Yeah, I unfortunately was the same way. Um, it's programmed into us.
Yeah, I mean,
You
when
know
you're an ambitious athlete, you want to accomplish big goals, and you're told working harder. Well,
exactly.
yeah, work harder, push intensity, push the things that matter, and don't be an idiot.
There you
You
go.
know?
I agree.
That's what it comes down to. Just don't go past that point where you're out of that flow state, man. It's all about dopamine. It's all about flow state. It's all about
And I
executing.
mean, when you put in high quality, low volume practices, you can do it more frequently.
Yep, you actually end up getting more volume of great training
Exactly.
and less volume of crap. because
Exactly.
you're able to do it more. And
And I
that's
noticed
exactly
that.
why
Go
I like
ahead.
the ISO. That's exactly why I like the ISOs though.
Yep.
And that's why I believe in that style of training. Because how many times do you walk into the weight room? You squat the house, you do a Tom Platz leg workout. Well, you just ruined tomorrow. You just ruined
You
the
ruined the
whole
next.
week.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if that was better, which it's not, even if it was a better stimulus in theory, then you just wiped out your next 3 days of skill work. What was the point of
Exactly.
that? There's no
Exactly.
point in that.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I
Mhm.
unfortunately had to learn that the hard way as well.
Me too.
But
Me
but
too.
you have to
So many.
you kind of have to learn it the hard way because this framework is not taught anywhere. Like
No, no, exactly. Unless you
nobody
get really lucky
unless you get
and
really lucky.
unless
Exactly.
you get really lucky, and you're kind of your coach was like this and instilled this in you. Even hearing this message, I told you I've been listening to Tony Holler since I was in high school, and I
Yeah.
still ignored it. And there's something about just learning things the hard way, and you eventually become a better version of yourself because you get smarter, you get wiser.
Yeah.
As
In a
Jack Cruz would say,
Go
it's
ahead.
survival of the wisest.
That's true. That is true. Yeah. In your most concise, accurate way possible, can you describe or summarize what that message is that we're talking about right now?
Yeah, so, I think like it goes back to that Jay Schroeder quote, movement is the key to life, velocity is the key to movement, position is the key to velocity. Work on position, work on absorbing force in positions and producing force rapidly, and then carry that up to your skill work and do that really, really high quality and stop at the point where you're reaching lower quality, the point of diminishing
Mm.
returns. Just stop succinctly. That's my message, and that's what I've learned, and that's how I've adapted my training now.
Okay, so now let's take that and apply it to golf. I know you're not a huge
I
golfer, so you
I play a little bit.
yeah.
I go to Pin Seekers or Top
Yeah,
Golf,
yeah,
or
yeah.
and I've played a game or two. So I'm more knowledgeable on golf in
Okay.
the past probably year than I ever was
So
before.
take what you know about golf and let's apply that principle to it. Just
Yeah.
what would you tell somebody, like, recognize the positions, like, first of all, what are the positions that somebody needs to own in a golf swing?
Yeah, and I think it's the same for all humans. It's the lunge, it's the deep push up or dip, it's the hang. Another way of describing it is, feet, hips, spine, shoulders, and grip.
Gotcha.
You train those physically, your body is going to be on such a high level. In theory, you could handle more volume and your performance is going to improve. But then, in golf, similar to throwing, it's when you get in that flow state and you put in high quality reps and you stop or you move on to something else when it's time to. So if I was going out to the driving range after a certain amount of time, this happens to me at Pin Seekers, man. I go to Pin Seekers, my first 15 swings are spot on. And then I start like missing the ball because I get tired. Move
Yep.
down to another club.
Right.
Work on your putting, work on your chipping.
Absolutely.
And when you're putting and chipping, have an extreme intention and be extremely focused and tap into that flow state there. And when you're out of it there, be done for the day. And you're going to be surprised when you go back out to the course to play a real game. You might find yourself in a flow state for 18 holes because your training has allowed you the capacity probably to go 36 holes of a flow state. That's why we do the ISOs. That's why we do that. Your body's prepared for it. But then at the same time, you're so used to you've accumulated consistent amount of volume, not junk volume, and every swing is great. And there might be times where that doesn't always happen. I know in theory, it's supposed to be great every time, but that isn't always true. I understand. So you might have to fight through a little bit in competition, but you're going to be at such a high level as a human, as a mover, that you're able to outplay everybody for 18 holes.
Do you think there's any value at all in learning how to still perform while fatigued? Because for some sports, there might be scenarios where it's towards the end of a game or the end of whatever it is, and your body's tired. And what if you're only used to doing high quality reps, not under fatigue?
Yeah, so there's a couple things at play here when I get this question. It's okay. Number one, with the isometrics, you are learning in the face of fatigue, in the face of absolute chaos. Isometrics are uncomfortable. They're not fun. They suck. And if you're able to stay in that same pulling position, firing pattern, to have focus in that, it's going to raise your level of what you're able to handle. Secondly, it's the idea of speed reserve. So as a sprinter, if you can hit 22 miles per hour, 24 miles per hour, then when it's time to go 18 miles per hour and say 400 or something, it's going to be a lot easier for you than some guy that trained at 18 miles per hour. What's his speed reserve? His speed reserve is 16, 14. So you're going to perform better, and your floor is going to be much higher. Your reserve is going to be much higher than theirs was. So that's why you train the high output. You train the extremes of the spectrum, because when you are fatigued, your performance is going to be better within that. And then this is why the foundation matters, like I was saying. Your body will be prepared for it with this isometrics and positional style training. You're going to be able to handle a lot more. And like I said, I think, you might get to the point with skill work where auto-regulation, you might be able to, say for a sprinter, you might be able to get to the point where you can run 9 reps in a row at your top speed or better. But that's not saying we should just blindly do that. That's why you have to measure things.
True.
And, so I truly believe that just adapting and leveling up as a human is going to allow you to do that.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing you say too is that because you've increased your ceiling, now when you're actually in a game or whatever competition you're in, you're only performing here, so you're not even going to fatigue as fast.
Yes, exactly. And when you get to the point where you're fatigued, the level is just so much higher than everybody else who is training.
That's true too.
Everyone else has been training in a state of fatigue and training in a state of sloppiness. So when they start getting worse, they're going to drop off way quicker. They might feel okay. They might say they feel okay, but they're get sloppy. You're going to still have speed. You're still going to be firing fast neurologically, much faster than they are.
Yeah, and I've always noticed that in any competition setting, I fatigue a lot less if I go into the competition fresh. And
yes,
obviously we talked this whole time about how to stay fresh. Whereas if I have been doing more grindy workouts, more endurance style workouts, the next time I go into a competition, I crash midway through.
Yep, exactly. It compounds on you, the total fatigue of the week. It compounds on you. And, this almost gets into the periodization conversation too of, my idea of periodization is know the demands of the week. If you have a competition coming up, and just pull back a little bit, do a little less volume on everything.
Exactly.
And show up fresh because that's what you're training for. That's what really matters. But, you should still be trying to push the needle in a sense every day on something. But, you know the time and place of when you need to pull back.
It. Yeah. And I think that's the whole message, is that just listen to your body, and your body will know. Like it knows. Do you think this is my understanding of it? If I'm trying to push through a plateau on, let's say, my swing speed, my understanding is that you start out with kind of coming off of a speed push, you start out with kind of a rebuilding phase where you let your body rest, but also you build your body back up. Then you move into kind of a balance between the two, and then you move into pure speed. And then after pure speed, you rest a little bit more, stay completely fresh, and then you can make your speed push. That's kind of periodization, but not in the traditional sense of I'm going to pick a point here in the season, in the off season, and try to hit this certain workout 6 months later. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to a sense, that's intuitive. And when your body, you need to make a push on speed, or you need to make a push on, more strength and power. But yeah, I mean, it's just complete nonsense to say, I'm gonna throw in the Olympics in 2028, but we're gonna do complete garbage training 6 months out in hopes that on one specific day, on one very specific day in one moment, that you're gonna compete the best you ever have just because you did all of this before. You know what that is? That's superstition. Okay, that's not real. Well, you know what's real? Getting as good as you possibly can, changing the variables a little bit, to be able to make those jumps, push through those plateaus. You're going to have to use variables, over speed, resistance. That's part of it. But to say we're doing this time of the year only, that's superstition to say that in 6 months you're going to be the best you ever have. You just need to get better every single day and listen to your body every single day, because your body is always changing. I don't even know how I'm going to feel in 3 days. It's impossible to completely predict that. I have an idea. I have an idea of what I need to work on right now. And I also think the best idea is to work on what your weaknesses are at that specific moment. What do you suck at? Get a lot better at that and raise the ceiling of what your body can possibly do, your human potential, and pull back when it matters. But yeah, just to say, we're going to do 2x8 of crunches, and hope that in 6 months that you're peaked. And we're going to pull back for like 2 weeks beforehand and do this peaking method and then not make any adaptation. That's just fake. It's not real. I'm going to catch a lot of heat for that. It's not real.
And I completely agree. I know that's not the traditional way of doing it, but I completely agree. And the reason I do is because I kind of found out about this style of training and implemented it, and it works.
Yeah, exactly. And also, let me make another note on periodization, because I love attacking periodization kind of. But, some of these, I love a lot of my ideas actually, they came from Jay Schroeder and Tony Holler and these plyometrics. Yeah, they came from the Soviet Union, right? And that's great. The exercises are great. There was periodization. The Soviets were big on periodization, and in some cases, some coaches were. Yeah. Let us not forget that half of those athletes or more were taking D-ball and tren.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
And doing absurd volume.
Yeah.
So it might work for them because they were able to recover from it. To take someone who's natural and say, we're going to crush you now in hopes that in 6 months you're better. That's not very realistic because they're not going to be able to recover like someone who's taking tren. It's just not real.
I completely
Not saying that the principles of the exercises aren't great, though. A lot of the plyos and the isos, that's great. That's phenomenal.
Yep. There's definitely value to setting aside some time to put on maybe a little bit of mass and strength.
Yeah. Definitely.
There's value to that for sure.
Yeah.
But
certainly.
It's
all about what you need at that time.
Right. Exactly.
And actually, no one knows who this guy truly was. His name was DB Hammer, and he broke things into 3 specific groups of athletes: rate, mag, and duration. So duration is like pure force and strength.
Okay.
Magnitude is in the middle. That's power. Mm-hmm. And rate is pure speed. So like turnover and just pure speed. Some guys might need to work more on pure strength a little bit. And I think the isos can do that, by the way. And some guys are going to need to work more in the middle on power, peak power. And then some guys are going to be so slow and overdeveloped on one end of the spectrum, and they're going to need pure rate work. So it's all about giving the athlete and yourself what you need at that time, what's your weakness, and eventually end up the best athlete that you could be.
Yeah, and I went, how Ryan has those testing numbers that predict what you should throw, and you can actually use that to get a general idea of what your weaknesses are and which side of the spectrum you should go to.
It's KPIs, yeah.
And I did something similar with that with golf, and it predicted my swing speed to be way slower than it is. And that tells me that I have a lot of rate, but not a lot of strength. And that's why I work on my weakness is strength. But
Yeah. So then, yeah, you grind it. Yeah,
but I'm
exactly.
curious for somebody that didn't have a formula or numbers like that, how could they determine whether they're weak in a strength
Yeah.
area, power
Yeah.
area, or rate area?
Yeah, so I think this is the Tony Holler idea of rank, record, publish. I think what truly matters at all times is like your skill output, obviously. So like how well you're actually doing, how far do you throw,
Yep,
how fast do you sprint.
exactly.
That's the most
That's
important.
the most important.
Let us never lose sight of that. Results are always king. Um, but then can you break that down to metrics that will enhance that? So yeah, say you need strength. I guess for some people that might be improving squat and bench, but there's other ways to do that. Isometrics, how long can you pull into position? How hard can you pull into position? I think that's a way is your isometric times. With if you're doing depth drops, can you scale it to the point where you're jumping off like a 48-inch box and landing in perfect position? You gradually working your way up. So it's just about finding metrics that you can keep improving. And for some people, obviously, that might be more speed or strength, and some people it might be more speed. So you dedicate more of your time to that, but still never losing sight of your skill.
I guess I'm asking, how could you determine whether you're weak in strength or speed?
Yeah, I think peak power is the way of determining that. So you look at like the force velocity curve. I think for me, I like to use the Kaiser squat right now. I know some people use like 1080 accelerations and stuff. For example, my peak power is 3,558 watts on a Kaiser squat. This is just one specific test to see where I'm at as an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
It was at 475 pounds. So that shows I am better on the force end of the spectrum right now, and I'm going to need to work, more on rate.
Gotcha.
So someone who's getting better power numbers at lower weights, they might need to work towards the other end of the spectrum. And you can use that with, bar speed on a bench press and stuff. Or accelerations. I know Chris Korfis likes to use watts per kilogram on an acceleration.
Gotcha.
So he's very in depth. He's very scientific. So I'm not going to speak on his behalf because he's very advanced. But you can find tests like the Kaiser squat, bar speed. You can find things to see where you're at on the force velocity curve, or simply, it might be as simple as, are you proportionally better at throwing 8-pound med ball versus throwing a 2-pound med ball versus throwing a 4-pound med ball? And ideally, you want to have as high of peak power as you can, and that's the key to.
It's kind of like how a shot putter would move, like let's say a 15-pound med ball much faster than
I would.
than you would, but
Yeah.
you could move a 2-pound med ball much faster than a shot putter could.
Yeah, and there's context with your event and your skill. Yeah, certainly. Like a shot putter probably does need to be a little bit better at the force end of the spectrum.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I certainly agree with you on that. I certainly agree with you on that. And as far as testing it, there's a lot of ways to test it. I think maybe that's where some of those med ball throws come in, Kaiser squat, some of those style of outputs. Yeah,
And a golf club is very light compared.
Certainly, yeah. That's a great idea. And for javelin, are you proportionally like really good with 1,000 gram, proportionally really good with 600 gram? Yeah, that's where you find out, do I need to use resistance or do I need to use overspeed?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at.
Exactly. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, no, that's a great idea.
And I guess what I'm saying is the lighter you go, the more you'll probably need overspeed, whereas the heavier the implement is,
yeah,
the
no,
more strength you need.
I definitely agree with that. And I think overspeed overall is a great stimulus too, because it makes your CNS fire so much faster. So, when it's the idea of speed reserve, like we were talking about. If you can convince your nervous system, oh, I can sprint 24 miles per hour, or I can come into a throw at 8 meters a second. When you're actually going, in your flow state, game speed, it's going to feel slow, in a way where you're controlled and you're able to sync up your technique super well.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, and also with resistance, of course, developing specific strength there, of course.
I completely agree, and my experience matches that exactly. One more thing I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
You posted a few posts ago. I don't know when it was, but you were moving your hands and your arms as fast as you could with nothing
Yeah.
in your hands. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that was a quick style rep with a towel. So with the towel, I'm trying to like pull my arms apart to have constant isometric tension,
Okay.
and then so if it was a curl to press. So that's teaching your body to separate the eccentric and concentric movements, which is super important for just like timing of your movements, understanding what's an eccentric, what's a concentric, and separating that, and it becomes like a neural firing pattern. So, we'll simplify it to a quick style bicep. You want to eccentrically lengthen your tricep or your biceps on the way down, and it helps you move everything in sync in the firing patterns. Look, I'm not the perfect expert on this. I learned those from Dan Fichter. I believe in them. I tried them and they worked. I'm a little bit simplistic sometimes, where if I see something like that, I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm gonna try it, and if I like the way it feels, I'm just gonna do it. So, but yeah, quick style reps are great. You can do that with bench press. That's a great way to develop power, by the way, on bench press and control of the movement. The idea of pulling into position, absorbing, producing force rapidly. Yeah, it's all in that family of work.
It's pretty amazing. What would you leave everybody with kind of a final thought? If
Yeah.
let's say they were doing whatever style of training they're doing now and it's not working great for them, would you recommend this style to them if they're a power athlete, of course?
Yeah.
And then what would you say they should do? Either resources to look into this or
Yeah.
ways to practice. What would you recommend?
Definitely. I think there's two things that everybody can and should be doing in their training. I think the first one is you should learn extreme isometrics, pulling into position isometrics. You can check out Jay Schroeder, Dan Fichter, those guys. You can check out their pages with that Evo Sport, Evo Code. You can also just DM me if you're interested in it, and I'll explain these isometric positions to you, because I think you can do those every single day, and they're only going to increase your movement quality, increase your CNS firing, increase your fast twitch fiber. Those are the first thing I'd say. And the second thing I'd say, start high velocity sprinting at low dosages. Feed the cats, Tony Holler. You need, all athletes can benefit from max velocity sprinting and improving it, because your neural firing is much faster, fast twitch is much better, and that transfers over to all movement. It's a global effect, and your body is going to get, in your human output is going to be so much higher as an athlete. All humans are athletes, and you need to train to be the ultimate human and ultimate human potential, athletic potential you can. And I think to do that, you need to master position and you need to max velocity sprint. That's the two things I'd say for all athletes. You'd say, I'm a javelin thrower. Why do you need to touch top speed? You don't touch top speed. The global effects of it, the physical effects of it, the neurological effects of it, they're so great. You can't miss out on those. And I'm actually ashamed of myself that for a long period of time I missed out on them, and it made me a much worse athlete. And lastly, I'd say, cut out fluff, man. What can you eliminate from your training? It's not always what can you add to your training. I just gave you two things to add. Focus on those. Cut out junk. Cut out, like we were talking about, when you're in a session and you're out of flow state, just stop and prioritize quality. And those are the three most important things I think you could take from me.
That's great. One question I have personally is, my fear with going fully to this style would be that I would lose some muscle mass in particular areas that normally right now I do some hypertrophy work for.
Yeah.
Like specifically, lats are very important in the golf swing.
Yeah.
And like for example, a pull up or a lat pull down
Well,
would transfer.
I'm still a big believer in body weight strength too and stuff. So like pull ups, I think you should get as strong as you can at your body weight. I think that actually is maybe something I missed out on talking about. So we'll cover it real quick. Yeah, I mean, you need to be great at manipulating your body, and it's not always external load. Some of the best athletes I've ever seen are phenomenal at pull-ups. The better I've gotten at pull-ups, the more in control I am of my body. Pull-ups, push-ups, some of those more, quote unquote calisthenic exercises, gymnastic rings, all of that. That's super important just to have global strength throughout your body system wide. And, it's not necessarily, I prefer pull-ups because pull-ups is a full body exercise. You might look at, say, lat pull downs and stuff, and you're kind of sitting, and so it becomes a little more isolated. And I kind of have moved away from that work. But yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of that. And as it pertains to losing muscle mass and hypertrophy, I'll say this: since I've started basically fully going to this method, I've stayed at a consistent 195 pounds, and I think a lot of it is what you eat, how much you eat. I might have recently dipped a little bit because it was Ash Wednesday. I couldn't eat as much, but so. But yeah, it's about fueling your body and fueling your workload. And when you're doing this training every day, I would be willing to bet that you actually get more time under tension in key areas of your body, and you will add some muscle mass if you are eating enough to fuel that. So I think that's where diet comes in, especially.
That's awesome.
I'm hitting steak and shake after this, by the way. So.
Oh, dude, you just made me so hungry.
Yeah, dude, steak and shake, no seed oils, beef tallow fries. I love it. I'm actually a fan of fast food. I'm a fan of fast food now. People, I'll get hate
high
for
calorie.
that, but yeah, high everything, high fat, high protein, high carb, high salt. Unless you're of course trying to cut, then you might, that's different. But for
who's
my
trying to cut? I mean, come on.
Yeah, who's trying to cut, man? Yeah, ain't worth it.
All right, Mike.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything else you want to say?
Yeah, thanks for having me. No, just thanks for having me. And if anyone, I'm trying to do better at getting back to people. So you can always, if I don't respond to your DM, comment on one of my posts. Just get a hold of me somehow, and I'll get back to you.
That's what I love about you, Mike. You just love to talk about it with anybody.
Yeah, no, exactly, man. It's like I almost feel bad I haven't done as good of a job of it, but comment on my posts. Come after me. I don't care. Just I'll answer your questions. So, yeah.
Well, thank you one last time, Mike.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thank you for all the wisdom. I'll just end the recording.
For sure. Thanks. Yeah, it's gonna be